if it's among the things you love reading, which is Stendhal's The Life of Henri Brulard. He writes for the happy few, for the future reader, for the reader who will read him in 70 years from now, enjoying the fact that in some way he is, as you said, not inhibited. Pre-posthumous in some way.
That's how Winston Smith opens his diary in 1984, almost in those words, probably not by accident. It's exactly how it begins.
So the memoir is written, you quote Paul Cavafy at one moment, the itch to scribble.
Yes.
You have this urge in some way to write your life. And I don't know if you make...
No, not just the life, just to write.
But in this particular case...
Cacoethia scribendi, yes, the urge to scribble. I knew when I was quite young that, not that it was what I wanted to do or would like to do.
But you had to do.
Had to do, yeah.
Is this an autobiography in any
No.
form? No. Because in autobiographies there's an autobiographein, the fact that you in some way come to life through the act of writing. It's a memoir, and you make a distinction that you think is important?
It's a memoir, and it's an attempt to locate myself and make myself more presentable by...
More presentable?
Yes, by scraping acquaintance with charming friends and putting myself in the same company as them, finding myself in interesting countries at times of war and crisis and revolution. So I always have to have an excuse for writing about myself until I do the Proust questionnaire towards the end, and I just say, you might want to know a bit about what I'm like. All the other things are, I happened to be in Poland just when the Solidarity movement was beginning. I thought I saw it coming. I met this guy who later became famous. I always feel I need a justification of that sort, and even when I write about the death of my beloved mother, it was a help to me, if this doesn't sound profane, that the week that I had to go and investigate her death was a week when the tanks were in the streets of Athens, and there was a counter-revolution and a coup and blood in the streets, and people I knew tortured and killed, and I had to deal with the coroner, who was the same coroner, and everyone here, I hope, remembers Costa Gavras' film Z, the same coroner who had returned the false verdict in the murder of Lambrakis. So even there I felt I'm trying to locate myself, perhaps futilely, in modern events. I won't say history.
I don't know if I'll have you read that passage about your mother's death, but I will read it.
Okay.
At all events, this is how it ends. I'm eventually escorted to the hotel suite where it all had happened. 2 bodies had to be removed and their coffins sealed before I could get there. This was so dismally sordid reason that the dead couple had taken a while to be discovered. The pain, this is so piercing and exquisite, and the scenery of the 2 rooms so nasty and so tawdry that I hide my tears and my nausea by pretending to seek some air at the window. And there, for the first time, I receive a shattering, full-on view of the Acropolis. For a moment, and like the Berlin Wall and other celebrated vistas, then when glimpsed for the first time, it almost resembles some remembered postcard of itself. But then it becomes utterly authentic and unique. That temple really must be the Parthenon, and almost near enough to stretch out and touch. The room behind me is full of death and darkness and depression, but suddenly here again and fully present is a flash and dazzle and brilliance of the green, blue, and white of the life-giving Mediterranean air and light that lent me my first hope and confidence. I only wish I could have been clutching my mother's hand for this too.
Yes, thank you.
It's an extraordinary, extraordinary passage, rather painful, but you immediately go from the scene which you might describe as to what happened to antiquity.
Yes.
To an area of the world that you're interested in many different ways.
And to civilization as opposed to primitive and barbaric episodes. And it's also as you know, it's a coda, because I opened the chapter about my mother remembering my first memory, recollecting actually, which is of the Mediterranean. It's the Grand Harbour at Valletta. First thing I can remember. Crossing, when I was 3 or so, crossing the harbour with her on a ferry and seeing this dazzling Baroque Renaissance city, white, coming down to the shore, very azure, cerulean Mediterranean, and then the different colours of the sky, and then the blending of the green and the olive. And so I've always felt happy and at home, and the light seems to suit my eyes in the Mediterranean. And that's where it began with her, and then, appallingly, having turned away from this scene of squalor and death, that's how it ended too. That was my first view.
Just to give some context here, what I read comes after your discovery that she committed suicide.
Yes, well, I already said that my father was an honourable and brave and modest and thrifty man, and all of those things he was to a great degree. But he was 12 years older than my mother, and he rather bored her, I have to say. It was a horrible realization.
Which she thought was the worst sin.
She thought, as I do, that boredom is the worst thing of all, and being boring is the worst crime. And she, whose name was Yvonne, which I always liked. When I was small, I thought it's a classier name. My English childhood was generally rather sort of drab and grey, and Yvonne, well, it sounded French. Well, it is French. She was very beautiful. She was interested in fashion.
Beautiful pictures of her.
Yes, she's lovely. She was lovely. And the wives of my father's brother officers tended to be, I hope I don't sound snobbish here, but they tended to be called things like Ethel, or Marjorie, or Nancy, or so. Yvonne, my mother was different. She was much more. She was just cut above. She looked different. And she would have liked to go to the theatre and have sharp and fashionable cocktail parties and smart little events. And she never really got any of this in my father. And so when she could, she left him. She left it too late and went off with a man who was not boring, who could quote poetry and was charming, a bit of a pseudo, actually, charmer, spoiled priest of the Church of England, but amusing. But alas, unlike my father, not thrifty, not modest, not honest, not brave, and probably, well, certainly, I think, bipolar. He needed to die, and he wanted to take her with him, and they made a suicide pact and carried it out in Athens.
She introduced you to him.
She wanted me to approve. Yeah.
Did you?
Well, yes, in a way. I mean, he was an appealing chap. I thought maybe a bit shallow, but not bad. Anyway, I don't think I would have dared say I don't approve. No, I couldn't have done that. I wish I had now. I could have warned her that he was unstable. Something a bit shaky about him. Flaky. What's the word the children, my daughters, use? Sketchy. Very good, very deadly word that people know right away. I could have. It's one of my regrets. I didn't say.
And another regret was that you were not there to take her phone call.
Yeah, well, that's true. There was before answering machines and cell phones were common. And when I went to Athens, and once I'd fought my way through all this stuff and that warfare that was going on as well, the hotel, and once I'd done the forensic investigation and found she hadn't been murdered, which is what had first been reported. It was first reported that he'd killed her, and then it was also at least 3 days I did think she'd been murdered. And had to see all the photographs and the forensic evidence. This included the hotel switchboard record of her trying to call my number in London repeatedly and not getting. I was young in those days, and I just got a job in London, and I wasn't at home.
Why do you think she had reached out to you?
Well, she loved me. I was everything to her. She left it was upsetting for my brother and my father because she left a note, which I finally found, took ages, but it was just to me. And that was very awkward, as you can imagine, to tell the remaining males of my family.
I want to go back to her.
She loved me, and she was always on my side. It's a fantastic thing to have a beautiful woman in your corner from early childhood. There's nothing.
Who doesn't spoil you?
I promise you, there's nothing
quite like it. As you said, who doesn't spoil you, loves you, lets you go.
Yeah. Doesn't spoil you for other women, though. She wasn't clinging. She wasn't over maternal. She never tried. She wasn't overprotective. She wanted me to go away because she thought it would be better if I went